I never had any.
Yes.
I would just like to say that I think that, oh, I'm sorry that you called on me.
I did.
Oh, okay. As comic book writers, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of talent is required to produce a comic book, because as a novelist or a person who writes books, you have 800 pages to describe and to produce background and atmosphere, and you guys have this little skinny paper thing, and you've got to have your art, and you only have those little bubbles, and somehow you guys manage to produce these amazing stories in just this minimum amount of space, and I think that takes a lot of talent.
Thank you.
I mean, one of the things, coming from a UK comics background, this was kind of drummed into us right away, because we come from a sort of format where you didn't have 22 pages to tell a story. You have maybe 3 or 4 pages. You've got to cram an awful lot in. You've got to compress your story to the point where nothing is wasted. So by the time I came to write American comics for Marvel, it was great. You know, having 22 pages was a luxury.
As an artist as well, the process of making the jump from the UK comics onto the American comics was very different, given that Transformers was my first American work. So as I guess a lot of you know, with the UK writing, every page was described, every panel was described. It would say what was in there, exactly what the dialogue was, because they had to be that precise about what was happening. But with 22 pages, I guess you can kind of loosen up a bit, so they do a broader overview of what's going on. And then as the artist, you have the opportunity to then move that around and play with things and take on I don't know, I guess you feel as though you're more involved. So working in the large format was good for the artists too.
One thing that's obviously different between a novel and a comic book is a comic book has pictures. It really carries the burden. Comics are a visual medium. And also, since I was an illustrator, I truly believe this, the more you can let the pictures tell the story, the better the comic book. And no matter how good the writer is, you don't want to get too bogged down in a long, windy, written, expositional kind of comic. You want it to move through the pictures. And I didn't always achieve that as a writer, but that was always the goal.
I mean, there was an interesting difference in styles when I came to Marvel US, because the Marvel method was to work what they call plot style, which was largely to drop, sort of 4 or 5 pages into one description of what's happening there. So you do a sort of overview almost of what's going to happen on pages 6 to 10 or whatever. So, it's much more the emphasis on the artist to sort out the pacing, the construction of the pages, what you're going to give emphasis to on the page. But with full script, which is the UK version, although now I know it's a lot more sort of prevalent both sides of the Atlantic, you nail down everything. You put the dialogue in there for a start, which you don't with plot style. You may make suggestions, but largely, you just leave it open for the artist to interpret. You see the pages, and then you come in with the dialogue. So it's a very different process as a writer to basically be presented with pages, sometimes wonderfully, that you look at and go, wow, I never saw that coming, that's brilliant, I can do wonderful things with that. And sometimes you think, the guy's drawn a big head on the whole page, and I have no room to put any dialogue. Which happened to me on one comic, not Transformers, I hasten to add, but it did happen on one where, my description for 2 pages had been probably, about 6 or 8 panels probably, and it came up with one big headshot and a couple of smaller pics across the spread, so it gets difficult at that point.
The one advantage with the full script sort of UK way of doing it, as opposed to, although I prefer the American plot, one advantage with the full script is that because you have all the dialogue there, because I always like to use gesture and expression and get a lot of character into them, with the full script you have the opportunity to, it's not lip sync as such, but you can get an expression or a mouth shape that in some way expresses what's in the balloon. With the American plot style, you sometimes they give you the occasional line, but generally you don't have all the dialogue. So you end up with what a lot of people used to call the Alleluia chorus, where all your characters go, which cuts down on some of the kind of potential emotion that you're displaying.
I have a question for you, Bob. Just in terms of how far ahead did you plan out story arcs when you were writing, and were there any particular characters that you were writing for more than others?
How far ahead did I plan out story arcs? I think it varied. I mean, sometimes I'd be able to plan out, like, 6 months in advance, and sometimes it was issue to issue. It really, I mean, depended on a lot of things. Like, for instance, if Hasbro was bringing in a whole new line of toys, and I knew I had to get them in the comic book, so I had to start planning ahead to get them into some storyline. So it kind of varied depending on various external circumstances as well as whatever I had in mind already. What was the other?
I was just asking for particular characters that you enjoyed writing.
Oh,
Other than Grimlock.
actually, I didn't care about it. I think I like Blaster and Ratchet earlier on. And, what else did I write? All of them. I love them all. Shockwave, Starscream later on, and there's what I wrote. I think I had some fun with Rat Bat, although maybe I don't know. The ultimate being counter. There's probably a few others, but I have to have them all in front of me. So, oh yeah, right. So.
We had an interesting situation on the UK comic because we were having to sort of tie in our stories into Bob's. We would sometimes either have feast or famine. Either we'd know, lots of stuff that was coming up and think, fantastic, sort of we can plan, we can use these characters because Bob's not using them. And other times we had almost nothing, so we had to sort of run these stories thinking, oh God, I hope he's not going to bring Megatron back in this story. So, sometimes we just had to take a shot in the dark, but other times we did have, sort of some advance info on what Bob was doing.
That's
one question for each of you. Bob, there's often been unfair on the D1 title where people only focus on Micromaster Wrestling and Power Washington. But it's something contrasted by rather dark storylines that you write as well. I mean, totally not the shop comics at all. Can you just talk a little bit about the contrast between doing the light stories and the dark stories?
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to have fun with the book, and I wanted my readers to have fun. I didn't want it to. Sometimes, especially, I was with Marvel for almost 20 years, and it seemed like there was a trend growing. Like every time you read a comic, you felt like you were just dragged through the gutter. All these horrible, awful things were happening to people, and life was as bleak as possible. And although, obviously the Transformers were two sides involved in this war that lasted forever, it was pretty brutal. I didn't want it to just be about that. I wanted to play off, obviously if you read any of my books, I really wanted to play off the fact that here are a bunch of alien, giant, extremely dangerous robots walking around the Earth. And although that creates all sorts of very serious situations, it could also create some fish out of water situations. Like you mentioned a couple of the more notorious stories I wrote in that regard. So I wanted to throw that in there to kind of just mix it up so that anybody reading Transformers didn't necessarily know what to expect from issue to issue. And even in some of the darker stories, I think I always try to sprinkle in some humorous aside, some sarcasm, some wisecrack, something to sort of lighten it up, just give it a more full-bodied flavor.
Regarding the style of the other Transformers,
Yeah.
with the more organic way,
Yeah.
was that partially because you wanted to be able to make it more expressive?
Well, there's the War Within 2 graphic novel is coming out soon, and they asked me to write the introduction to that because that's kind of related to what I write in that. Because a lot of people ask me those kind of questions, in as much as I didn't actually want to do Transformers in the first place, and I know that's not kind of a very popular thing to say, but I didn't know anything about Transformers really. I mean, I'd done some of the UK stuff purely because I was looking for work. When I was doing the UK stuff, what I did before Transformers was Thundercats, and back then we didn't have that many titles in the UK, and they were all licensed stuff. They were like toy stuff, weren't they? And Thundercats was the book that everybody wanted to get onto because Thundercats was the one that was more superhero in its nature. You know, it was like drawing superheroes because we all had these great aspirations of working for Marvel in America. We wanted nothing more. So, and then I did the Transformers stuff for the UK, and it was fine. It was paying work. To then get the opportunity to work for Marvel US was fantastic. But I would rather have done a book other than Transformers. So some of that is why I took this organic approach, because I wanted to draw real people. And, you know, so a lot of people said that they look like real people in robot costumes. Well, that's largely the reason for it. But as you'll read in the introduction to the War Within graphic novel, I feel very differently about that now that I look back on it. But that's how I felt at the time. So it's just because I wanted to draw real people.
And finally, can you talk a little about how you came up with Death's Head?
Well, Death's Head was an interesting one. Death's Head was going to be a launch, you know, sort of aimed solely at Marvel UK, never to touch the pages of Transformers. You know, it was a pitch I'd had around for several months, you know, in front of various powers that be at Marvel UK. And Marvel at the time were gearing up to do, you know, originated American format comic books, and I wanted one of those to be Death's Head. The plain fact was, I don't think anybody there thought the idea of a guy who killed people for a living was a good idea for a comic book. Certainly not to sort of spearhead a new line, even though he was a robot and he killed sort of other robotic beings and so forth. But I just don't think anybody thought this was a strong front runner. So in the end, you know, sort of I was determined to show that this character could work, but we had limited options of where he could be. You know, at the moment he existed as a pitch and a couple of sketches from Jeff. So, you know, sort of we had to do something with him. And the answer was, well, let's put him in Transformers. But that immediately opened up a huge problem in the fact that as soon as you put him into Transformers, you run into copyright problems with Hasbro. You know, sort of, you know, sometimes unless you sort of make a specific copyright outside of that, you know, you might have to, well, he featured first in Transformers, he might be a Hasbro property. So we came up with the idea of running a one-page strip, just a sort of jokey, throwaway one-page strip that we ran in Dragon's Claws, which was the first launch in the new line. And in the meantime, we put him into Transformers, you know, having decided that we was now Marvel copyright, you know, we felt free to put him into Transformers. Transformers stuff came out first. So, you know, sort of he got his own sort of personality and style in Transformers. So when it came to do the Death's Head comic finally, he was sort of fully rounded and ready. So it just sort of grew organically out of that.
I think Death's Head is a metaphor for Simon Furman, really. I mean, it's just so obvious, isn't it? He kills characters for a living.
Yes.
With the camera.
Oh, okay. This question is for Bob. Bob, your issue number 24, After Death, where Optimus Prime dies. I found personally, from a science fiction point of view and a character point of view, it was some of your greatest work. Especially, like, given how the way the integrity you showed Optimus Prime, he was willing to sacrifice himself, where anybody else in the shoes would have said, "Oh, Megatron, she did great, this is my way out." But you showed, like, the integrity of that character, and it went on, in my opinion, to show on just all the good Optimus Prime did afterwards. Was I always linked back to that. What I want to ask you is, where did you get the idea to do that? And also, did Hasbro tell you you have to kill off Optimus Prime?
I'm sure Hasbro didn't tell me that. Let's see. My feeling was about Optimus Prime, and I guess Megatron too, was I didn't want them to dominate. There were so many characters, I didn't want them to dominate the books. I mean, they're the leader, they're in charge of everything. You know, I wanted to move them off the center stage for a while. And I was trying to, I think what inspired After Death and other stories maybe similar like that, was I just wanted to find original ways, surprising ways to move characters out of the picture for a while. Keep the fans, the fans would know, like, they're still out there, how is he going to bring them back? Try to keep that suspense going for a while. And that was what pushed me to do a story like After Death, really. As far as the integrity issue, I mean, that's just who he was. He had to make that awful decision to sacrifice himself.
Thank you.
Sure.
Simon, can you retell your April Fool's joke on Hasbro? Is that even still around somewhere?
Right, I mean, what I will do is steer you towards a site called comicculture.com. Go and check out that. The third issue of Comic Culture, which is a magazine put out by Rob Tokar, has the definitive. We still don't have the actual April Fool's gag. Does everybody know about this? Is this a sort of story I'm tied to? Okay. Basically, when I was on the book, we decided as a sort of gag to sort of see how friendly Hasbro were going to be with us and how much attention they were paying to the book at that time and how much we could get away with. We thought we'd play an April Fool's gag on them. We'd come up with the most ridiculous, atrocious, unpublishable story outline we could think of, So, Rob just said, put anything in there you want, anything ridiculous, no matter how ridiculous it is. So I came up, I think we did it as something like the overview for issues 72 to 73. So issue 72 was about sort of 4 pages worth of just typewritten notes on what was going to happen in it. And we had giant cigar-smoking nuns duking it out with Megatron on a freeway, crushing, some kids in prams and things. And we had a mechanical sheep on the ark stuffed with explosives that nobody dare touch until Cup is overcome by urges and sort of gets carried away with and blows up the whole ark and all its occupants. And so on and so on. We rolled out, sort of ridiculousness after ridiculousness. And then, sort of the final bit was a little note for issue 73. And then there were none, we called it. And then, the nun spelt as in N-U-N. And, and then we just put, oops, they're all dead, as the story overview for that episode. And we sent it off to Hasbro with a memo dated 4/1, so whichever year it was, I think 90, something like that. So off it went to Hasbro, we waited. And Rob was by now getting just a little bit worried about this, sort of wondering, would we just get a terrible reaction to this? Would they get the joke? Anyway, days go by and nothing from Hasbro on this pitch. So Rob is getting more and more worried, and I'm just I've just followed orders. So anyway, finally he thinks he'd better phone Hasbro and ask them about this story pitch. So he phones the contact at Hasbro, who says, yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's good. It's pretty cool. We just have a few concerns. And so Rob's okay. So expecting they've got the gag. He goes, so what happens after this? They're all dead, aren't they? And so and so Rob, of course, was now stuck. He didn't know what to say or do. They hadn't got the joke. He didn't know quite how to break it to them now that it was a joke. So he tried to steer them towards, have a look at the memo, so what's the date? Yeah, it's 4/1/90. Okay, and what's that? Well, it's the 1st of April. Yeah, and what's that? It was a Sunday. No. So finally, April Fool's Day, and there's a silence on the phone. Absolute, for minutes, so Rob tells it, for minutes of silence. And then finally, Rob's thinking of, clearing out his desk already. And then finally, the guy just breaks down laughing, and he's like, you guys, you got us. Oh, I've got to do this on some other guy at Hasbro. So, it kind of told us two things. A, they were pretty good guys, and they could take a joke. And B, they really weren't looking at what we were doing.
I bet they were after that.
But Rob tells his whole story, and about some other cover problems they had with Hasbro, where they had to kind of reattach heads to bodies, even though we had headmasters which lift off, completely from their shoulders. So, but if you go to comicculture.com, check out when issue 3 of the Comic Culture magazine is coming out. But Rob did a whole piece on that, which is just fabulous, and he remembers it far, far better than me, the actual detail of what went on in the storyline.
For Andrew.
Yeah.
I just want to let you know first that I thought your article was my favorite of the original.
Thank you.
But I just know if there are any issues that stand out to you as like representative of what you thought were like some of your best pages. UK or US?
I don't remember much about the UK stuff. I don't know why I don't. I don't know, 70, I think, just because it was the first one, that whole beginning stuff, and the whole flight scenario, the pathos thing, that was really good. And the kind of work that I mean, all artists do this, they look at other work, other artists, and I mean, they don't rip it off, but I mean, you're influenced by things, or you see things that other people do that you think, that's a really appropriate way of expressing a certain scene or whatever, and you just draw on certain things. So there was a particular artist and his work, I won't tell you who it is, by the way, that I was looking at the time that seemed so relevant to how I wanted to portray that. And so I worked really hard on that issue and probably the one after, because I wanted to make an impression, because I really wanted to tell the story well. And so I felt very, very satisfied with that. And Simon was right, actually. At points, it did become a rush towards the end. I liked all that stuff with... Simon was saying that the way that some of the storylines were probably going to carry on with the nucleon thing and the planet where Grimlock went to, and there was that little character and all the foliage was made out of metal. I can't even remember what that was all about, but that was fun. So I was looking forward to doing more of that, because having a planet that was organic but metal as well was great, and just gave me more opportunity to put all those ridiculous like toasters and hair dryers and vacuum cleaners in the background and screwdrivers and things, you know, all that little stuff going on. So that was fun. Yeah.
One more question.
One more? Okay, one more question. Is there anybody? Oh, well, there's one hand up.
Great. This is for Bob. I know you're an artist also, and I was wondering if you had any role in designing any of the original characters that you wrote in the comics, like Straxus or Scround, anyone like that.
I don't believe I designed either one of them. I think I gave some more detailed description on Scrounge, but I did design some of the characters, not the Transformers themselves. Obviously, they came from Hasbro. But I designed Circuit Breaker, the original character sketch of that. And I remember, I think initially getting pages back from Don Perlin when I had the issues about the Scraplets. And it wasn't what I conceived, so I sent back some sketches to that. I also wound up drawing the cover to that one to really show this is what I want it to look like. These little mischievous mechanical devils. And that was and then there were several characters that are scattered throughout there that are based on like people at the Marvel offices. You know, like there was the Robot Master character was based on a Marvel former editor-writer. There was a character named the Mechanic who was based on a Marvel editor. Who was, looked like that, and actually he was very handy at some things. And there was, there was probably another bunch of characters that were either named after people, like a lot of my relatives were in there. Just threw in names of people I knew here and there.
Just by way of a blatant plug, that sketch for Circuit Breaker features in the upcoming Titan collection, Maximum Force. And we've also got some of Bob's original cover sketches in upcoming Titan collections. So, we're just working hard to put some extra bonus material in these collections. And like I say, we've got a lot of Bob's original art for Transformers. I think Andrew has one more thing to say before we wrap up.
Oh, me, yeah. I don't really know how to explain it really. Something that I would like to have seen when I was trying to get into comics, and something that I never really had the opportunity to see, was original penciled artwork, because it only ever gets inked up, coloured, printed, and there you go, you see the finished article. If you're lucky, occasionally you'll see pages of finished inked artwork. But because I would have liked to have seen that when I was trying to get into comics, we've put together a whole series of packs based on the War Within 2 series. and you can order these off of the Wildfire website. Each pack will contain an issue of, whichever issue it is, of The War Within, signed by myself and Simon. And then what we've also put together are booklets that have got a copy of Simon's original script, so you can see how the script is all put together. And then photocopies of all the penciled artwork before it got inked and coloured. So if anyone is interested in that kind of thing, of how a book's put together, come and talk to us. We'll show you these so you can have a look and see what they're like and give you details of how you can order them.
And we would just say that there are a very limited number on one of the dealer tables today. Over at Paul's stand, which is the one with all the UK flags on it.
Yeah.
So you'll know it. We have got one of each. I mean, they're very limited at the moment because we just couldn't lug a lot of stuff over. But if people want to just go and look at what these are, they're on Paul's table. So, but you can order them off the site.
I will say on my behalf, since it's coming to an end, if people see me wandering around and the questions haven't been answered, feel free to walk up and ask. Okay?
Oh, I've also got, if anybody is interested in buying original artwork, I've brought with me the only remaining pages of the original Marvel stuff that I've got. So I'm looking to, if anybody was interested in buying or just having a look at some of that, it's cool too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.